Okay, so now he is their leader. He has accepted their offer to be their military commander and fight their battles for them, on the condition that they make him their head, which they have accepted as well. So he is now essentially the ruler here. He's the top guy. He's the judge. He's the leader. He's the de facto king, although they don't really have a king yet, but still. Although again, and they're invoking the name of the Lord. They're saying these things in the name of the Lord. But we don't know really if the Lord has actually chosen Jephthah or if the people did. I mean, the people did. The Lord has not, as far as we can see. But Jephthah is the guy, is the man of the hour, at least. So, Jephthah sends messengers. So in chapter 11, verse 12, Jephthah sent messengers to the Ammonite king with this question. What do you have against us that you have attacked our country? The king of the Ammonites answered Jephthah's messengers. When Israel came up out of Egypt, they took away my land from the Arnon to the Jabbok, all the way to the Jordan. Now give it back peaceably. So this is a history dispute. We're talking about now issues that go back many generations at this point. In fact, later on, during his reply, Jephthah is going to say this happened 300 years ago. So we're delving deep back into the past to explain what this particular feud is about. This is not a legitimate claim, by the way. The Ammonites did not have a legitimate claim to this land at any point. So this is not a legitimate cause for war on the part of the Ammonites. And Jephthah is going to say that here. Jephthah sent messengers back to the Ammonite king, saying, there's a lot here, so let's go through it. Now, before we get into this, there's a couple things I want to mention. This is actually a pretty important little history lesson here, because Jephthah is going to recap what we read about back in Numbers, for example, and he's going to say this happened in the days of our forefathers. And it was, according to him here, it was about 300 years ago. I don't think we should get too particular on that 300-year mark. I don't think it necessarily was exactly 300 years. It does help us get a rough time frame for when he's saying this compared to when it happened. I've talked before about how the book of Judges is a very floating chronology. We really can't identify any specific event or person in the book of Judges in an actual chronology that we have assembled. We can date the Exodus, and we can date the kings. We date the Exodus by dating the kings. The timeline that we worked out for Old Testament history basically goes back to making sense out of the years of the Hebrew kings, dating them and cross-referencing them with other kings of other countries, and then finding a few fixed points related to astronomical signs that these other countries recorded, and then dating those, and then by that we can date the Hebrew kings. It's a complicated. I mean, it's complicated. I mean, it really is difficult. But the fact is, the long and short of it is that we can date the Hebrew kings pretty precisely down to David. We have enough information and we didn't know this for a long time. I'll talk about it more when I actually get to the books of the kings. But for 2,200 years, we did not know how to interpret the numbers of the kings. So this is a long problem that we have from basically the 2nd century BC into the 1900s. But we have figured it out. Okay, it's like the code has been cracked. We have figured out how to date the Hebrew kings, and by matching them up with their contemporaries in other countries that also kept records that we have, especially Assyria, because Assyria kept records literally of each year, of each king, and then by finding some of those years that were marked by fixed astronomical events, which we can calculate, because the sun, moon, and stars still move at the same rate they always have. So we can back calculate using our advanced brains and mathematics and calculators and whatever to figure out when these fixed astronomical eclipses and events happened, and then fix different king years to those events, and then fix other king years to those king years. And by doing all that, we can come up with a spine, a backbone to history. And we can do that all the way down to the days of Solomon. And then by using Solomon's dates, we can back calculate all the way to the year of the Exodus, because 1 Kings chapter 6 verse 1 tells us that Solomon began building the temple in his 4th year, which was the 480th year after the Exodus. So we can date all the way back down to the Exodus. And then from the Exodus, by using the ages of the various men, Moses, and then Jacob and Joseph and Jacob and Isaac and Abraham, we can calculate all the way down to the days of Abraham. I talked about that when I was going through that. The question mark there is how long were they actually in Egypt? How many generations passed between the end of Genesis and the beginning of Exodus? And I covered that when we went through that. It's 200. They were not in Egypt 430 years. The 430 years covered the time from Abraham to the Exodus, and so part of that was the time Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob spent before going down to Egypt. I covered all that. So we have a timeline that goes back to the days of Abraham pretty solidly. The one area that is still a mess, that is still very murky and unclear, is the time of the Judges. And this would be basically from 1400 BC, after they settled into the land, to sometime in the 1000s BC, when Saul was called to be the king. And we don't really know the Saul's dates. Saul is fuzzy too. And of course that led to David. So there is about a 400-year stretch there, from about 1400 BC to about 1000 BC, or at least 1100 BC, where we really don't know that much about when things happened. And the book of Judges itself doesn't reference any other events to help us fix any of these things. And the book of Judges also doesn't even stick to telling its own story chronologically. I mentioned here at the beginning of chapter 10 that those judges seem to be consecutive, but not all the judges in the book of Judges are consecutive. Some of them will be overlapping. And so it's really hard to tell. Okay. Here in this speech that Jephthah is about to give, we get the one actual period of time that we can fix to something. And that's 300 years. So he's going to say that the dispute that they're having here over who controls this particular land happened 300 years ago. Okay. Which, if we're talking now about 1400 BC, that means Jephthah, and I don't think it's an exact 300 years. I don't think that we should be fixed on it's exactly 300 years. I think it's safe to assume he's rounding off, either up or down. I don't know, and by how much I don't know. But I don't think that we should take it. I mean, it's literally been exactly 300 years. It could have been 320 years. It could have been 280 years. Okay, it's like I don't think that we should be too specific about that 300-year figure. But it's been about 300 years. So, and I think we can assume that. I think that's a safe thing to take as on face value. But you do have to keep in mind that Jephthah, although Jephthah is a lot more articulate and educated here, some of our commentators will tell you to dismiss everything he says here, either because it was a later addition at some point in time, or because Jephthah himself, this whole speech was inserted by some later writer or something, or because Jephthah himself was an uneducated man from the country, which he might have been in that sense. I mean, he was kicked out of the family. But I don't think that we should necessarily assume that means he doesn't know what he's talking about. However, he does say a couple of things and do a couple of things later that should make us question exactly how much knowledge of some of the stuff he does have. However, I think the 300-year figure he mentions we can roughly assume to be accurate, and that's been about 300 years since the events they're disputing happened. Okay, so with all that being said, let's now go into the actual message, a very long message, that Jephthah sends to the king of Ammon here, who, as far as I can tell, has not gotten a name yet. I don't believe that this particular king of Ammon has been given a name yet. I don't think he does get a name, actually. This is what Jephthah says. Israel did not take the land of Moab or the land of the Ammonites. But when they came up out of Egypt, Israel went through the desert to the Red Sea and on to Kadesh. Then Israel sent messengers to the king of Edom, saying, "Give us permission to go through your country." But the king of Edom would not listen. They sent also to the king of Moab, and he refused. So Israel stayed at Kadesh. And they were not allowed to go to war with these nations. God told them not to do that. He did not want them to. They're their kinsmen. The Edomites, the Ammonites, the Moabites are all kinsmen of the Israelites, and God did not want them to go to war with them. So they were not allowed to fight these people. They instead had to ask permission to pass through their territory, and when they were turned down, they just had to kind of walk around it. Next, they traveled through the desert, skirted the lands of Edom and Moab, passed along the eastern side of the country of Moab, and camped on the other side of the Arnon. They did not enter the territory of Moab, for the Arnon was its border. Then Israel sent messengers to Sihon, king of the Amorites, who ruled in Heshbon, and said to him, "Let us pass through your country to our own place." Sihon, however, did not trust Israel to pass through his territory, or he would not make an agreement for Israel to pass through his territory. He mustered all his men and encamped at Jahaz and fought with Israel. We read at the time that Sihon seems to have occupied this area at some time before. Reading going back to Numbers. Let's see here. Numbers 21 is when this account starts. They passed through around Edom in the previous chapter. Then Aaron died. They had the bronze snake incident. And now they're going around Moab. Let's see here. I don't know where exactly. There it is. So Numbers 21, verse 21, they're sending messengers to Sihon, king of the Amorites, asking for a safe passage, asking for permission to pass through. And in verse 23 it says he would not let them pass through. He attacked them, they fought back, they defeated him. In verse 25 it says, Israel captured all the cities of the Amorites and occupied them, including Heshbon and all its surrounding settlements. Heshbon was the city of Sihon, king of the Amorites, who had fought against the former king of Moab. This had happened previously, and had taken from them all his land as far as the Arnon. So at some point before the Israelites got there, this Sihon, king of the Amorites, had attacked the Moabites and taken part of their land. And that is actually the land that we're talking about here. If anybody has a dispute with the Israelites over that land, it would be Moab, but it's not Moab who's complaining about it now, it's Ammon who's complaining about it. So continuing with the story, the recap of Jephthah is giving here. Then the Lord, the God of Israel, gave Sihon and all his men into Israel's hands, and they defeated them. Israel took over all the land of the Amorites who had lived in that country, capturing all of it from the Arnon to the Jabbok and from the desert to the Jordan. Now, since the Lord, the God of Israel, has driven the Amorites out before the people of Israel, what right have you to take it over? Will you not take what your God Chemosh gives you? Likewise, whatever the Lord our God has given us, we will possess. Are you better than Balak, son of Zippor, king of Moab? Did he ever quarrel with Israel or fight with them? He tried to curse them. He wanted that Balaam, son of Peor, to do that. In the end, he couldn't curse them, and they had to infiltrate them with seductive women instead. For 300 years, there's that 300-year figure. For 300 years, Israel has occupied Heshbon, Aroer, the surrounding settlements, and all the towns along the Arnon. Why didn't you retake them during that time? I have not wronged you, but you are doing me wrong by waging war against me. So now Jephthah is assuming the role of the king here, saying that you're attacking my land, which means you're attacking me. Let the Lord, the judge, decide the dispute this day between the Israelites and the Ammonites. Now so he's basically saying that you have no legitimate claim to this land. You have no dispute over it. Which is actually true. We read about that in Numbers. If anybody had a reason to want to fight Israel over this land, it would be the Moabites, who apparently had lost it to the Amorites sometime before the Israelites even got there, back in the days of Moses. And they're not disputing over it. It's the Ammonites who are disputing over it. They had nothing whatsoever to do with it. Now, Jephthah does say a couple things here, though. So he does say the 300-year figure. He does say a couple of things in that last paragraph I want to bring attention to. For one thing, in the early verses here, in 23 and 24, 23 to 24, he talks about the idea of the God giving you your land. Okay, whatever God you worship, if he gives you that land, that means that that's the land he gives you. And of course, God, this God, the God, Israel's God, has made a covenant with Israel to give them the land that he promised Abraham way back in Genesis 12. But it was a common cultural belief at that time that whatever land you possess is the land that your God gave you. So that's why Jephthah is saying that your God not give you your land as our God gave us this land. He also makes a mistake here by calling Chemosh the god of the Ammonites. And that was actually flipped. The Chemosh was the god of the Moabites, and Molech was the god of the Ammonites. This is actually kind of important. It's not clear why he calls Chemosh the god of Ammon. Maybe this particular Ammonite king did worship Chemosh. Again, he's actually got this slip because Chemosh was the god of the Moab and Molech was the god of Ammon. And maybe he's just confused, or maybe there are enough Moabites in this contingent that maybe it's accurate, or maybe this king worshipped Chemosh. I don't know. But I also think it's very possible that he's just confused. Because both Chemosh and Molech, the worshippers of both these gods, offered human sacrifice. And that's going to be important here because Jephthah is going to do the same in a moment. So Jephthah, whatever understanding he has of their history, Jephthah does seem to have some pretty fundamental misunderstandings of the gods. Both his God, Israel's God, Yahweh, as well as the gods of these other nations. I think he's getting the gods of Ammon and Moab confused, and he's getting them confused with his God and assuming that his God wants human sacrifice the same way that these gods do. The people of these gods, Ammon and Moab, Molech and Chemosh, did offer human sacrifice. And I think Jephthah is mixed up in thinking that his God wants that too, which is why he will do what he does later on. So anyway, that's our history lesson for Judges 11. I said before that everything that we read in the Bible is going to be built on what happens in those first 5, 6 books, the story of them taking the land. And I said that from after we get done with that, everything that we read is going to grow out of that somehow. So be aware, just don't be surprised if we're going to be pointing back more and more as we go through to previous chapters and previous sections that have been written. Because everything that happens afterwards is going to be derived from what happened in those early books.